grow it eventually.
That's right.
This
Baby
helps.
steps.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, thanks for joining us. Did you get the show sheet that I sent over?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Got that.
So we don't typically use show sheets all that much.
Okay.
We like it to be pretty unstructured and kind of like there's so many show sheets on other pods, which is great. Like the structure is awesome, but we want this to be an opportunity for you to come on and just kind of like vent and talk about Dynasty and, take it a step deeper on some of the topics that you've probably talked about on every pod that you're on. And just try and go a layer deeper, and hopefully we get some additional insights from it.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. I don't know. Do we need to do a rundown, or are we pretty good with where we're at, Kyle?
I think Ryan's one of the most professional out there. If he's got the show sheet, I don't think he'll have a problem following along.
You asked me at the beginning anyway, like what we're doing today, so I'll run through that anyway. But
yep.
Three main segments for the most part. It's just open discussion about the season and the oddities that it holds, and then I'll take over for a fun little segment that he does, and then I'll take it back and we'll wrap up
with an exercise.
Yeah, Ryan, you're on Eastern time.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't want you to have to like run to the TV and watch Mahomes dominate, but we have kind of like a soft, hard deadline of like trying to get this done by 8:00. That way you have a little time to get over there.
Sounds good.
Okay. Kyle?
Well, that's perfect. All right. If we're ready, then I'll roll into this thing. Okay. Welcome to Dynasty Self Help, a podcast helping you self-actualize in the hobby of Dynasty Fantasy Football, a show where the only muscle you can injure during our exercises is the brain. I'm Kyle LaPointe, downloading my thoughts to you from Fort Worth, Texas, and joining us from State College, Pennsylvania is my co-host, Jeremy Schwob. How are you now?
How could I not be amazing? It is opening night of the NFL. We finally made it.
It's actually happening. It's really cool.
For now.
And I think that kind of brings us to, we're going to have a pretty pertinent 2020 topic tonight. But before we get into that, I noticed that there's a guest who's joined me on my couch. Can you introduce me?
Yeah, it's my esteemed pleasure to bring on a really incredible guest that we have today. It's my absolute pleasure to bring Ryan McDowell on the podcast. And I don't even really know where to start introing Ryan. I mean, if somebody's listening to this podcast and doesn't know or follow Ryan, then we're doing this whole thing backwards. But obviously one of the faces of DLF, has two kind of the mainstay podcasts, the DLF Dynasty podcast, Dynasty Blueprint, which, recent news has transitioned a little bit and been picked up by the Locked On family of podcasts, and it's going Locked On Dynasty with some other great names. And, he's, the man behind ADP, the godfather of Dynasty football, some might call him. Just an all-around good guy. Ryan, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm happy to be on here. This is definitely an exciting night. I was not sure if we would get to this night as far as kickoff of the first game. I didn't know if we would even have week one. I was definitely one of the doubters. I've seen some people kind of retweeting those old tweets from the summer saying that football wouldn't happen, and I'm definitely glad I was wrong on that, and we're going to enjoy it while we have it.
Well, you're right. I mean, it didn't happen with a lot of colleges. I mean, I think that's one of the things that they don't quite have the bankroll. They don't quite have the ability to really, truly monetize and put this stuff together. But the NFL managed to make it happen, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah, we all are. And, I think we're not out of the woods yet totally, but yeah. I think we're definitely in a different spot than we were a month ago or a month and a half ago when, we were seriously having some doubts, especially as Major League Baseball was having some issues. But we're going to talk about kind of the lead into this season, as well as the season itself, and kind of reflecting, into the future about how we'll perceive this season going forward based on what happens. And that's what we're going to spend the meat of our conversation today doing. And then, as always, we'll put our guest onto the hot cushion. So hopefully Ryan's totally ready for that. And then I'll take the reins back, and we'll do an exercise that is probably similar to what maybe a lot of pods do with buying players, but we'll do a little psychological spin on it and try and push Ryan out of his comfort zone a little bit. How's that all sound?
That's not hard to do.
It's already uncomfortable.
That's right.
All right. Well, why don't we just jump right into the topic at hand today? So we are talking about this 2020 pandemic season. I really came up with this idea to have an episode and write an article on DLF as part of my Psychology of Dynasty Ownership series, really out of the Commission Impossible episode that Ryan had with some other, Fish and some other guys there, just talking about how to run this season logistically. But then I wanted to kind of take it a step further and think about how, as dynasty owners, we're going to reflect on and really just deal with this season, whether it be perceptions of players, our roster construction, future picks, rookies this year, all these kinds of variables that we don't know what's going to happen with them. And as I mentioned a month ago, our story of how that might look is probably a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking a lot more about shortened season, which may still happen, but we'll kind of take that as we go. But Ryan, kind of coming into this season, what are your general impressions of maybe how this one is different than other dynasty seasons?
Well, I mean, I think almost everything will be different. A couple things that come to mind are still just the uncertainty of what's to come as far as schedule. Will we get an entire season? And obviously, none of us know that right now. No one does. But just the thoughts about that, the expectations about that, for each individual dynasty player will really impact their strategy. Because just a couple months ago, you had plenty of dynasty managers selling those veteran players. Maybe they're giving away Drew Brees or Tom Brady or some of these older running backs, thinking if we don't get a 2020 season, these guys are really going to be worthless. Their value's already being driven down just due to their age anyway. But if we have to skip a full season, then that would obviously just be advanced even further. So I think we've already seen team building strategies affected just over the past couple of months. Now that we're actually here and we are going to have some football, I still think that will happen. Maybe not to the same degree, or maybe not quite as extreme. But I think just impacting strategies. This probably, I guess, you would see more in redraft, but I've seen some talk and some discussion about you want your team to be as top heavy as possible. That maybe we only get 6 weeks, so you want guys who are going to start strong. You want you're not worried as much about depth, and then the complete opposite end of that is, I want as much depth as possible because IR spots and short-term IR and potentially players being exposed to COVID. So the more quality players, the better. And even if I don't have the studs, I've got the depth to get me through the season. So I mean, I think both of those are understandable strategies, and I think we could see them kind of leak into dynasty as well.
No, I think that's a really interesting point too, right? Like, okay, we've got these extremes, but one could be right and the other could be totally wrong. And that's kind of one of the things we like to talk about on here is that part of your process? So, I would say, is that something that as a dynasty owner, each year you reset your strategy based on the outlook of what's going on? Or is this is this something that we're all looking at different? And that's a question that I've asked myself a few times. Like, am I doing this just because it's COVID, or am I doing this because I want to, and because this is my normal dynasty build?
Yeah, and I think in some cases it's probably hard to say, in the moment, and that's okay. That's fine. We're going to learn a lot from this this entire pandemic that we're going through, and there's going to be many new rules, new trends, things that are basically adopted because of COVID that become normal. And that's obviously true in all walks of life. I'm a teacher, and we're already seeing obviously things that that are changing, that I don't expect to change back, once this is over, whatever over looks like. But I think that's definitely going to be the case in football and in fantasy football as well. So as far as just kind of assessing your own strategies, I think that's something you should be doing not only every offseason, but really all the time, almost nonstop. And I think if you're just riding with that same strategy every year, it's probably not going to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, typically, other than Jeremy only taking Cortland Sutton, the strategies that he has are pretty wild and varied.
Yeah. It is interesting though, because I think as we react to what's going on across the NFL and then therefore dynasty landscape, it would be silly not to react at all, especially in terms of your process from year over year. As running backs have been kind of the position itself has been rejuvenated with a lot of these really valuable assets that are involved more in the passing game and scoring more points. It would be silly to only draft wide receivers like me. But I think us looking at this season in particular, I want to be cautious about overreacting too much and taking on too much of a redraft mentality. I know that there's been a lot of caution around kind of rookies and, with a limited offseason, which, I don't know if that has merit or not. It's yet to be seen, but I would suspect that's probably been a little bit overblown, and kind of replacing some of those end of stash players that maybe fit your process a little bit better, and fit your roster construction a little better for kind of more backups, handcuffs, things like that. I mean, there was a point in the season where we're trying to roster the backup QBs at some point. I wasn't doing that, but people were clamoring for it because, there's going to be a week where almost every QB hits the COVID list for 3 weeks. And, I think that's too far on the spectrum of reacting to what's going on. And I think it's maybe more valuable to look at some of the assets or some of the outcomes that may be more predictable based on what's going to happen. And those being future rookie picks in terms of, the picks themselves or the players coming in, as we have kind of a shortened evaluation or, data point wise, they missed their last season of college. There's less chance for late bloomer guys or late breakout kind of guys like Joe Burrow, CEH, Justin Jefferson, all those LSU guys that really vaulted themselves into first round consideration in the NFL draft, at least. And, particularly kind of over and underperformers based on how the season goes. If it's, a shortened season or, guys on people's depth charts get put on the COVID list, or a quarterback, God forbid, gets put on the COVID list, that's going to affect the whole offense. And so what do we do going forward thinking about this season? So, if there's anything in there that you feel strongly about, Ryan or Kyle, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think the rookies have definitely been a hot topic, both the current rookie class that we're about to see debut, and the 2021 rookies as well. And of course, they're both going to be impacted. I mean, it's been discussed ad nauseum, as you
Sure.
kind of mentioned there. And are they going to get off to a slow start? Are they at a disadvantage because of no preseason or no rookie mini camps? Like, yeah, obviously they are. So what should we do as dynasty players? Well, I mean, we should have a longer leash with these guys. We should have more patience. We should kind of grade on a curve. Are we going to do those things? Probably not. We're probably still going to be impatient. We're still going. I mean, I saw Albert O dropped in a league last night, the first waiver run of the year, and I mean, he's not, he's not that super stud player that you've got to have on your roster, but I think he's worth a roster spot in a 25-man dynasty league. So already, kind of seeing examples of that impatience, and again, that's nothing new. We as a whole are impatient with these guys every year. So it's no surprise, but it is maybe just a reminder, or maybe COVID and everything that is encompassed in this. Maybe it will push some dynasty players the other way and give them a reason to be patient with the rookies. But it does make me just kind of thinking about everything you're saying, makes me think increasing roster sizes might have been a good idea. And that was something that I've been against, not strongly against, but I haven't done it in my leagues. I've advised others not to do it. My process and my thought was just go with unlimited IR. And then if your players are if they're getting COVID, if they're being quarantined, whatever the case might be, you've got that unlimited IR for those players. You can add other players to take their place. And I still think that's helpful, but we're going to see every player impacted by this, whether they get COVID or not, because of everything we're talking about here. We're going to see rookies. We're going to see players on new teams as well take longer to develop, to build that rapport. And if your dynasty rosters are the same as they were last year and the year before and the year before, it's going to be that weekly battle of, do I hang on another week, or do I pick up, the new running back for the Dolphins or whoever it might be, because I need him this week. So honestly, I've been against the increased roster sizes this entire offseason. And now having some of this discussion, hearing your thoughts, Jeremy, it makes me think I might have made a mistake there.
Well, I know I've got a league that I commissioned. I increased. Basically, I just did not decrease. And I've been a couple of leagues that chose to do that, right? Yeah. Your off-season expanded rosters, you just leave them alone. You don't have to cut them. I felt like it was a very unique situation, because that's a massive rule change. This isn't like something simple that doesn't barely impact you at all. This is a massive rule change. And there was almost zero kickback in any of those leagues that I was in that did that, the ones that left them. Now, the one thing I did was I said, you know what? I'm getting rid of taxi. The taxi is all part of your active squad as well, because the last thing I want is you to have to follow these taxi rules and you have to promote a guy because you have no more running backs. And like, it just felt wrong to me. So in addition to leaving the extra players for the offseason, I moved the taxi to active, which, in all honesty, why do we have a taxi squad, right? I mean, that's a subject I know I've heard you guys talk about on Commission Impossible.
Yeah,
I think I'm totally in agreement. After I set some leagues up and I went, why do I even, what does the taxi do? It just restricts you. It doesn't really help you at all. But anyway, that's something that I felt like was unique to this year, was a monumental rule change, was just water over the bridge. Like, or that's nothing, no big deal.
Yeah. And I don't know. I obviously can't speak for every league, but the players that are in my leagues, and I commish, I think I'm up to about 12 leagues I commish. The players in those leagues have been patient and understanding, and they've kind of gone with the flow with this whole off season. no real pushback. I mean, I think hopefully if you're in a league, if you're in a dynasty league, hopefully you trust your commissioner to make the best decision on behalf of the league. And those decisions won't always be the same from league to league, of course, but you've got to find what works for your group of 12 or 14 or whatever. But it seems like everybody has just really been understanding. And a lot of times in fantasy leagues, we treat it like life or death, and we want to pick a fight with every little thing. And it's been, at least in my experience, it's been the opposite with this experience.
We were arguing in one league over a particular rule that involved betting side bets on who was going to win each week. And I mean, you're like, that is so far in the past. Like that this year, if somebody was just like, dude, it's COVID, I don't have time to mess with that. Oh, okay, cool. Just get rid of that. No problem. It's
yeah, so I wish we were still arguing about those things.
Right. And Ryan, going back to your point about kind of showing more patience and maybe lengthening the leash a little bit on rookies, as a psychologist and a recently trained dynamic therapist, I try and also ask myself, like, what else might be true if that's the case, or what we need to do. And something I hadn't thought about yet was, are we then going to kind of lower the bar for what a breakout does look like for rookies? Or even, if someone does break out, do we view that differently? Like, is breaking out in this season in particular for a rookie, like, such an indicator that he's going to be so good because he didn't even need a full off season? Or is that just an overreaction to, like, this guy was probably really good and was going to break out anyway?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I hope that's the case. I mean, I hope we can, again, kind of grade on a curve and understand that expectations should be different this season. But I mean, in fantasy and dynasty, we like to compare year over year, and we like to say this is the best performance of the past 5 years, or things like that. So, big picture, I don't know. I don't know if we as analysts, we as an overall dynasty community will really take that into account. What I will say is, if we don't, like, if you see that the rookie running backs of this year being compared to last year's class and not favorably, then that's a chance to go out and buy those guys, right? Like, take advantage of that mindset, of that overwhelming opinion, if that becomes the case.
That's an interesting point, and what we've just talked about kind of makes me wonder about the assessment of the 2021 rookies. So 2021's coming in here, and one of the premier stats people use these days is breakout age. Yeah. Well, you're going to eliminate the ability for these 18 and 19-year-olds to literally break. They're not going to be able to do that. So
17-year-olds in case of Brian Edwards.
Right. So do we discount when they break out at 20 in this year? Is it an asterisk? Do we throw that out of our data? Do the Peter Howards like break their spreadsheet and throw it against the wall? I don't know. That one's a really intriguing one to me. Especially Jeremy, I know that's a big one that you follow, right? The breakout age.
Yeah. I dabble in breakout age.
Well, and that stat specifically, and I think you make a great point, Kyle, because of course a lot of the talk is, as we kind of mentioned earlier, is about the 2021 class, and some conferences are playing, some are not. What happens to the draft, and all of those are good topics to discuss and consider as well. But the breakout age stat specifically affects every college player. Like, we don't know if a freshman wide receiver at USC might have broken out this year. Maybe he's the next Brian Edwards and he's 17 or 18 years old. And we still have 3 years to assess that player in different ways. But that specific stat is going to be skewed for basically the next 4 years.
Yeah, forever. We'll have a blip in the radar of breakout age, and we'll have to decide whether we want to continue using that stat as something that, works over those periods of time, or if we just ignore it for a year.
Yeah. And talking about kind of that reaction to whether we have to make a decision to ignore it or adjust or whatever we may do, I want to bring this back to over performances and under performances. So certainly this, brings in the human component of what our expectations are, but a lot can happen this year. It can be, it can be a shortened season. It can be the player themselves going on the COVID IR, or just the regular, I think 3-game IR now. If they're, maybe they would battle through some sort of turf toe or some sort of injury, but now it may make sense to rest them for 3 weeks. It's going to limit the sample size kind of not no matter what, but there's a strong chance that there's going to be a limited sample size. And so with that smaller, group of games and group of opportunities at data points, the performances become magnified. And so if someone's not meeting expectations, or if someone is kind of coming out of nowhere and having a great season and, it gets cut off at some point, what do we do with that? It wasn't that long ago that, if we kind of look past what, our hindsight bias and what happened last year with AJ Green's training camp injury, he played half a season and in 2018 and averaged like 17 points a game in PPR. And so how many people were going into last offseason thinking, oh, he, was great until he got injured again. He has scored 17 points a game, or I think most people were thinking like, oh, he didn't finish a season again. And so it's, what do we do with these smaller sample sizes? And do we take it and try and extrapolate it like some people might do? Do we do, if the quarterback gets COVID, do we do splits? There's so many nuances that, sure, we don't know and we can't necessarily plan for it, but we need to be mindful of our tendency to probably have an overreaction to whatever may come out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's all really well said. And, Peter and all of the other data analysts are not going to like this, but I think this year more than ever, it becomes about the narrative. It becomes about the story and, digging beyond the numbers, because all of the things that you described there are certainly possible or maybe even probable, that we're going to look at a quote unquote season, right, of maybe a handful of games. And I don't know necessarily that extrapolating those numbers over 16 games is going to help us. I mean, we've kind of done that with Preston Williams, for example, from last year. He starts strong, kind of comes out of nowhere, an undrafted guy, and then has the injury. So I think sometimes that can get you in trouble as a dynasty player. But yeah, like I said, it's going to become about the underlying story and whether the player got COVID or their quarterback did. Really, all of the things you mentioned there as possibilities. So as far as vast underperformance versus outperforming expectations, I would like to think that we would give more credence to those top performers and tell ourselves that that's even more impressive if this rookie comes out and he's a top 10 scorer at his position given all the circumstances. And I think if there's a player that doesn't get on the field or maybe even struggles, we just kind of excuse that and make excuses for them. No training camp or no preseason, no rookie mini camp, and all of these other things that are going on. So honestly, the end result in most cases is really going to be what we think about those players right now. And we just, we make excuses and we carry that into the season. And unless our mind has really changed on a player, then we're just going to let ourselves keep telling that same story.
Yeah, that's exactly true. We all bring something to the table, and that can be helpful or harmful. And I think that was part of the message of kind of the intro of my pandemic psychology article on DLF, was how we reacted to training camp news. It was, with our opinion coming in on a certain player was going to determine how we reacted to some small piece on one play that a beat reporter was writing. So it wasn't always even direct evidence. It was, a human through a human reaction. It wasn't, so that's, it's about as flawed as it can get. But yeah, I mean, you make a lot of good points there, and all this can be, the funny thing about this is that there could be a chance that nobody gets COVID or nobody kind of fantasy viable gets COVID, and it turns into a normal season. And then, that doesn't mean that this discussion is not fruitful, but it means a lot of the things that we've been doing and reacting to have likely been somewhat fruitful or somewhat, frivolous. And so, I don't know what the answer is, and nobody does. And so I think it's good to plan, but it's important to not kind of overreact to what we don't know.
Yeah, I think these are good conversations regardless. And we would all love to sit here in 6 months and say that was a waste of time even talking about that, right? That would make us that would make us all pretty happy, I think. But I really don't think it is a waste of time, because I do think it's good to be prepared and to consider all scenarios. And I don't think having the discussions is overreacting.
Certainly, and I think that this is what we always encourage, is that even if you're doing great in your dynasty leagues, even if you're, you don't need help, it's never harmful to kind of self-reflect and analyze what's going on for you. And any little bit that you reacted to, that even if you're not proud that you reacted to it, it's important to just be honest with yourself about it and really reflect on how that may or may not have altered your process and your reactions.
Well, and some of the comments you made there, Ryan, definitely make the guy in me who's never played poker before, I swear, go, you know what? I've got some new fake numbers I need to put up for this coming year, where I can say, well, no, I ran this new analysis. It's called the Fantasy Dynaminator, and my Dynaminator says this rookie would have been great in the or this freshman would have been great. So, you really need to pick him up in Devy. See if I can make some of that stuff work.
The COVID correction.
COVID correction.
It's like in The Office, the what Kevin's symbol that he uses to make all the numbers work.
Right.
We'll edit it in after the show.
Perfect. Well, we got through this one. It was a lot of fun, but now it's time for me to scoot on down to the other end of the couch. So, Ryan, you can take my place on the hot cushion. So I'm going to discuss your fantasy football footprint and follow that up with some questions. Please keep in mind, I'm going to be very direct, to the point, and brutally honest, and the questions are not necessarily going to be easy. Is that okay?
We'll give it a shot.
All right. Before we get into the meat of this potato, I'd like to ask just a few things about you. What subpage of myfantasyleague.com do you use that most people do not?
Oh, that's a good question. I think wow. I don't know if a lot of people use this one or not, but I'm in way too many leagues. So when I'm just trying to track a certain player using that, I think they call it, status in all my leagues. So that's the page I use quite a bit. Basically, you can find out if a player is a free agent across all of your leagues, or if he's on your roster, on another team's roster, or whatever the status might be. So that's one I use quite a bit, especially around waiver time.
That's one I don't think I've used very often, so writing that one down. Okay, whereabouts do you live in this world?
I live just outside Louisville, Kentucky.
Nice, man. We've had several guests from the Kentucky area here this year. This has been wonderful.
I went to college at Dayton and had a bunch of friends that were from Louisville, and I learned how to say Louisville while I was in college. I'm a native of St. Louis, so I always said Louisville, and then to piss them off, I would say St. Louisville, and then they told me how to say Louisville, and now I say it correctly.
Yeah, I don't think we take offense at Louisville necessarily. That's fine. Louisville
The St. Louisville, maybe not so much.
There was always a Saint in front. St. Louisville, to really agitate people.
Yeah, that's even worse. Yeah.
All right, Ryan. Obviously, you've been playing fantasy football a long time. Have you ever redone a trade because you felt bad about it after you had completed it? Like maybe you really were trying to send something out and it didn't quite work out. Like you really screwed the guy over and you didn't really mean for that to happen, and you just out of regret swap that thing back.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I am a commissioner of a bunch of leagues. So I don't know that I've ever redone a trade like that, but I've gotten trade offers where I basically countered by adding even more on my side. So yeah, I have done that, which is pretty close, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's an amazing part of it. Sometimes we make these trades. Jeremy traded with the left Bauer, as we call him, with John Bauer. And now John Bauer is a proud owner of KSV. And I'm pretty sure like Ryan or Jeremy's got about half of the roster that the Bauer had before. So, it's unfortunate. I don't think he would trade back, though.
Just Nick Chubb. Not straight up, but a little Justin Herbert in there, but I'm happy with the deal.
It was a pretty good play at this point. All right, so I'm a beer guy, but I do dabble in whiskey from time to time. What is your favorite fermentable used in the sour mash?
Yeah, so I'm not much of a drinker, actually.
No.
I mean, I'll try something new every once in a while, but for the most part, cherry Coke is as hard as I go.
There you go. Well, we all have our poison of choice. So
yes.
My final intro question: what is your favorite thing about fantasy WWE wrestling?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I have it. I don't know if I have a favorite, actually. Maybe you can teach me about that one.
That's a new one. I didn't even look it up before I asked that question. So now it's time for my hard-hitting analysis.
I get to say what my favorite part is.
Okay.
I'll say points per pin escape.
Ooh, nice. Points per pin escape. Yeah, you definitely want
of P's.
That. Yeah. Okay, now it is time for my hard-hitting analysis and drama-laden questions. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Question number 1. The Dynasty Blueprint is a podcast that I have followed for years. I really like what Matt Williamson has to say, and the other guy is great too. Recent changes have made for migration and additions of other talented people I already listened to in Marcus Mosher and Kate Maggiu. If the quarterback for the Denver Broncos were to do a podcast about himself on your new network, it would be called Locked On Talk. Who is the co-host of Locked On Cowboys with Marcus Mosher?
Oh my gosh. This is the hot seat. I have no idea.
That is Landon McCool at McCool BCB. So as a Cowboys fan, I've listened to Marcus Mosher for quite some time. So that's pretty exciting for me to have that voice that I've followed on other podcasts merging. My world's coming together. It's wonderful.
Sorry, Landon. I should have known that. So I actually don't have a favorite NFL team. I didn't grow up as an NFL fan. I kind of think that's helped me in some way as a dynasty player. But as far as listening to those team specific podcasts, I don't think I've listened to a single one. No offense, Marcus or anyone else.
I will say that not having a team has been beneficial for me as well. So the Stan Kroenke and the St. Louis Rams broke my heart, but I think it's really helped me kind of be detached and try and be aware of those biases. Because if I had, the St. Louis Rams to still root for, I'd totally be biased to, Gurley if he was still there and whoever else we drafted.
It's a product of it, or you get the other way like me. You're a Cowboys fan for so long that you just never end up with a Cowboys player. But I say that, but I got a lot of Dak because he was so cheap a couple years ago. You get him anywhere. But yeah. Well, question number 2. Ryan, you are a co-owner of Dynasty League Football, or DLF. This is an amazing site and content source for all things Dynasty Fantasy Football. The rankings are very comprehensive, and the trade analyzer tool is very helpful for getting confirmation during a trade. It has recently been improved even more with Jeremy producing quality articles on a consistent basis. Unfortunately, it was then worsened by allowing Jeremy to do rankings because they are nothing but wide receivers. When coding a website, HTML and JavaScript are popular languages. In what year was the programming language Fortran created?
These are fun. Fortran. Yeah. No idea. I don't know. I've never even heard of that.
You probably only got about 100 relative years, maybe even 60 or 70. Let's just throw one out there.
Yeah, 2010.
Okay, Fortran was a language they taught me when I was in college, and it was already a dead
2017.
Language. So it was 1954 would be when Fortran, well before Al Gore invented the internet.
I guess that's why I haven't heard of it then. Okay.
Okay, question number 3.
I'm doing so well.
John Bosch hosts many fantasy eliminators for charitable donations and in support of the Scott Fish Bowl. This year I competed in your eliminator and noticed that we took wildly different paths to build our teams. You drafted 5 defenses while I drafted the only defense I took across all of my eliminators. You took 3 of the big 5 rookie running backs while I took 3 second-year running backs. I took 4 tight ends and 4 QBs to 1 of your each. By my math, the positions of QB, RB, WR, TE, and DST will score 32, 27, 28, 26, and 17 points respectively for top 12 finishes. If you were to sum up all the points and average out the expected scores, who did I draft at spot 6.11 in the DLF mock June number 4?
I think that was probably Calvin Ridley. That sounds about right.
That's, I think I got a steal here. I got David Johnson at 6.11. Oh. Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent player though for
not bad.
Late.
Not
yeah,
bad.
I'm happy with that. I went kind of a little off kilter there. Got a quarterback early with Lamar Jackson, so it was kind of nice to have somebody like that.
Yeah, the eliminators are a ton of fun though. Thanks for supporting those, and I totally switched up my strategy this year. We'll see if it pays off. Basically, looked at last year's winning teams and found out that on average they were carrying around 3 defenses. So I went heavy on defense, and I think I did 5 of the eliminator leagues. Went defense heavy on all of those. I think you said I only got 1 quarterback, so that's not ideal.
Drew Brees too. You went old.
Yeah, definitely would prefer at least 2. It is a super flex format, but just try to mix it up. Those are fun leagues that John does.
I pretty much went at least 4 quarterbacks in every league. So after analyzing the scores and seeing just what the difference was between a top 6 quarterback finish, I just wanted a top 6 quarterback finish anytime I could get it. So The more quarterbacks, the better. Rather than having 3 defense make my team, I just give me quarterbacks because 1 QB can, make up for that guy with 3 points at the back of the end of the list.
Right. Yeah. With the defense, it just kind of became a floor play, right? Like, they're always getting points.
They never get injured.
Right. They never get injured. So we'll see what happens. I did that in all of those eliminator leagues. So if I totally bomb this year, I'll switch it up again. Like I said, always adjust those strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyle, the evaluation of your David Johnson pick will solely be made based on tonight's performance. As if there's a game to overreact to that everyone will have opinions on, it will be game 1, week 1 of following a COVID pandemic. That people will make either the nail in the coffin or they'll say David Johnson is all caps back.
No, the best thing that will ever happen, he'll score 3 receiving touchdowns and have like a 2.5 yards per carry and like only get 30 yards on the ground.
For 29.
Yeah, he'll have something terrible. So it'll be a great stat game and people will still be like, oh, no, he's terrible. It'll be wonderful. We'll continue this discussion on for years. Okay. Final question. Question number 4. Right. And in your website bio, it reads, here at DLF, Ryan's focus is on identifying, monitoring, and analyzing player value. This is in stark contrast to Jeremy, who is a value agnostic. Despite the differing core philosophies and outlook on the fantasy spectrum, the relationship seems to work itself out in the end. Speaking of sitcoms that ran for 8 years in the late 1980s and early 1990s, who is the character Larry Appleton's distant cousin?
Oh, that's Balky. That's Balky Bartakamus.
Cousin Larry! All
I
right.
got one.
Phenomenal. Well, one is really strong, by the way. That puts you, I think, in the top 5 leaderboard of all time. So
Okay, I'll take it then.
It's like a DFS tournament when you're just chilling at the bottom, and then like you get a wide receiver or you get a quarterback to wide receiver stack, like 80-yard touchdown plus a defense pick six, and it's like you just zoom up. That's what you just did with that one answer.
Good. I'll take it.
a lot of zeros, a lot of half points. Like, honestly, some of them were kind of, we're giving them the half point. I mean, it wasn't as good as it could have
Generous
been.
half points. That's when you get a solid, correct 1 full point. That's put that on your mantle.
It's pretty awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate your candid and truthful answers and my insightful and hard-hitting analysis. Well, that was fun. Appreciate it. Always enjoy the hot cushion segment. I think it kind of opens us up as part of the psychology thing. You don't know what to expect, and sometimes it's good to reach out there and on the cuff be able to bring back a 1980s sitcom that you probably haven't thought about in a decade.
Yeah, I haven't. That was fun. Those are good questions.
Or have never heard of in your life.
I had a dog named Balky. I mean, come on, Jeremy. Where were you? Oh, wait, you weren't born yet.
In a womb, probably. All
All
right,
right,
so
Jeremy, so you've got an exercise for us tonight, right?
Yeah, and before I jump into the exercise, I want to follow up on my Kevin Malone reference earlier. So he uses a Kelevin to fix any accounting errors, and Oscar quotes him by noting that Kevin would always, fix a mistake, saying, "A mistake plus Kelevin gets you home by 7." So that's our COVID correction symbol that we'll use for Kyle to be the best ranker in history of following.
I will create a stat that is so perfect, no one will ever be able to argue it.
It's the Kyle Evan.
The Kyle Evan.
There you go. All right. So as I mentioned in the intro, Ryan, some call you the godfather of Dynasty Fantasy Football. So tonight, on the night of our NFL kickoff, we're going to do an exercise called the Godfather Offer. So we're looking to see what player you think is important for you and maybe then other Dynasty owners to acquire here right at the beginning of the season. So my goal is to get you to kind of determine where you'd be willing to make such an acquisition if you really had to do so. So if the pressure was on, you feel like the guy's going to be unattainable, like a David Johnson 3-touchdown night, and that guy's not going to want to sell him after this. But I'll leave it open to really anyone that you want to choose. And we're going to do this in a couple different ways. So we're not necessarily going to negotiate back and forth. It's kind of going to be an internal dialogue for you that you produce externally. But we're going to do this in the form of starting with just rookie picks. To acquire that player. And we'll do the same thing for that same player with just players, and then a combination of picks and players, just to make it maybe more applicable for a variety of people that see this. Does that all make sense?
That's great. I love it.
Okay. So, Ryan, your prompt is, who do you think would be an important player to buy in Dynasty here right before the season kicks off, almost regardless of price? Like you want this guy tonight.
There's a few, of course. I think we all have a few on our shopping list. Sure. Probably the top guy that I would be targeting right now would be DK Metcalf.
Okay. All right. So now we have our player. Depending on how long this goes, we may do another one, but we'll start with DK. So now that we have the player, let's talk about the price. So we're going to start with just picks or combination of picks. What would you feel comfortable moving for DK Metcalf?
As far as future picks, obviously, one future first is not getting it done. I'm projecting Metcalf as a future top 5 dynasty wide receiver in both value and production. So, to me, players in that range are typically worth 3 random first. I don't think you have to pay that right now. So he's between 1 and 3. That doesn't necessarily mean 2 first, but it most likely does. I don't think a first and a second would get it done. So I think the starting price is probably 2 future first.
Okay. So I'm just plugging this in the DLF trade analyzer as we talk.
Okay.
Just to have a reference point to see where we're at. DK Metcalf's single QB value is 458.7 in the analyzer, and 2 random 2021 firsts would be 477. So it's pretty close. But there may be somebody that's religiously attached to that value and wants more. So you may be comfortable, maybe a little bit uncomfortable at that 2 first price, but would you give up more? What would you add to it if they're pushing you and you want him?
Yeah, and I think you probably would have to give up more for him at this point. So I'll slightly disagree with the trade calculator on this one. Actually, one thing I like to do that I have seen work, it definitely won't work every time because for some it might feel like an obvious play, but it's the Ricky Williams move. I give up my entire draft, right? So I'll give you all my picks next year, which might be a first, second, third. It might be a first, second, third, fourth. And that looks like a lot more than it is.
You do that every time.
We did that at least we co-own.
Yeah, I trade all my picks. So, yeah, I love that move. So you'd add so you'd still be at 2 firsts with adding in a second, third, and fourth. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. Okay. I would do that. Like I said, I just don't think that's not that much more than the 2 first. But I think it might look like, it might look better than it is, I guess.
Right. And so just to show that, so each individual first in the analyzer right now is 253.3. Adding a second is 91.3. Adding a third is 32.9, and a fourth is 11.9. So yeah, it's, and those in isolation, who knows what they are. It might not be adding much, but you certainly have the value kind of back on, the pick side fully, and you're giving up even more to maybe convince that person. But I'm gonna push you even more to see if you really want DK Metcalf and see if you would do this. So since you're in the game of adding in those picks. What if we go into your next draft class as well, and you give me a second from there? Would you do that too? So we're talking 2 firsts, a second, third, and fourth in 21, and then a second in 2022.
Yeah, I think we're nearing the end point here as far as adding on. Because I believe in the player, because I think eventually his price goes to 3 first, I would add 1 more second.
And the third, right?
No.
Yeah, I said third too.
Oh, no, second.
I didn't say third for the record. Kyle did the nice debate and switch there.
It almost worked.
Almost caught you. You'll throw in a fourth though, just to seal it, right?
No.
Hard no.
That's it. This is as far as I'm going.
Should we go into 2023? No, I'm just kidding. All right, so we found our price point, at least in picks. So now we're going to move just to players. So what combination of players would you be looking to move at a slightly uncomfortable price to secure DK Metcalf because you think he's going to be the one to own in the future?
Well, I think we typically start with players at that same position. And I probably no surprise, but I like to move on from those veterans while I can. It's not always very easy to do during the off season, but now that the season is upon us, you're going to get a selling window for guys like Julio Jones. So that's where I would start.
Okay.
And to me, I would could make that even up. I would gladly do it to buy the years back on DK.
Okay. So I plugged that into the DLF trade analyzer, and Julio would actually be at 480 above DK's 450. So, that might even get a deal done. Who knows, especially with, us approaching week 1 here, that, people are looking at their lineups especially. And so that might get it done. But Kyle and I, we're a little harder to agree with. So
You like
we
our
want
DK.
a little bit more.
Yeah, I've noticed.
You're catching on. Kyle, what do you want to add to Julio to squeeze out of Ryan?
Well, it's Julio, and we know what he's got left, and there's not a lot. So he's going to have a couple more good years, but we're going to need something back, in the future here too. So maybe one of those late round, second round type rookie wide receivers. If we could add in, a Brian Edwards, I think I'd be pretty happy with that type of a swap.
I bet you would. Did you say late second round? Did you mean late first round?
I got him late second.
Are we time traveling back to March and May?
Yeah. So, one of my goals with a deal like this, like I said, is to get younger and hopefully stay in that same tier of production. Definitely still expect Julio to have a big year and to outscore Metcalf this year, but really the plan is to build around those young players. And if I already have Brian Edwards, I'm probably not treating him like a throw-in. Although I think that's an interesting discussion, though. The bigger the deal gets, the wider the definition of throw-in becomes, right? Mm-hmm. So in a deal like this, you might be willing to throw in a player who's a 7th or 8th or 9th round startup draft pick. And some of those might be like Christian Kirk, Brandon Cooks, Michael Pittman,
Brandon Ayuk, kind of.
Brandon Ayuk. There you go. Mm-hmm. There you go. Guys like that. And then in another deal, a smaller deal, those guys might be your targets, right? So right. It just totally changes from trade to trade.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because the article session 7 right before session 8, the pandemic psychology article, I did the psychology of trading where I talked about some of that, where it's kind of diverting the eye a little bit, and you keep kind of you can either do it that way where you're keeping the core piece as the focus, like if you really want to get DK and really want to give up Julio, then you kind of do whatever else needs to be done at a reasonable price in the background with, or I guess in this case in the foreground with, whatever kind of throw-ins you want to add while you're still acquiring the piece that you want and still, giving up the piece that you want. In this case, it was a little bit different, where you were mentioning how, having the focus still on us in this case getting Julio, you're kind of diverting, or you're kind of keeping the focus, the spotlight on Julio, and saying, you'll get Julio, but you can just give up, or you can just get this piece in addition, and it may be less important than it was originally.
All right, so we don't have Brian in this deal, but we got Ayuk. Is that what I took out of that? We can swap out Ayuk instead of Brian Edwards, and this deal can happen.
I think we can do that.
Can we add a third onto our DK side and get Joshua Kelly as well?
No.
It's only 48.3 in the calculator.
He's a steal at that price.
Oh man,
I know. All right. We'll throw in a 2022 second and third, and keep Kelly in there. What do you think?
Okay.
All right. Well, that's 2 deals we've gotten done now. So now we're going to switch to a combination of you giving up picks, and we'll do some players as well. So we'll not use anyone that we've used so far. Who might you use other than Julio? Maybe a player and a first, or a player and a couple seconds, or something like that to go a little bit lower than Julio.
In the DK deal or a separate deal?
So
okay.
You're looking for DK, but you're willing to give up a first. And what complementary player would you toss in there to first to make that value up?
A deal I actually saw being discussed on Twitter the other day, and there seemed to be some strong opinions on both sides, was Stephon Diggs and a future first for DK. That's a price I would pay. And that's, like I said, there were some who seemed to think that was a crazy price to pay, but I'm willing to do that.
It's definitely name shock, because a year ago or before that would have been unheard of, obviously, but just shows that everybody hates Josh Allen as a thrower.
Well, I would do that. I would do that as long as I had Paris Campbell in there too. I think if we could just nudge it up a little bit, maybe that's enough.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can add anything. I think that was already a pretty strong offer.
All right, so you don't think you can add anything, but what? You probably don't like Corey Davis anymore, do you?
I've got concerns.
You want to just throw him in there for me?
So that Corey Davis is a roster clogger to me. And I love when I drop my roster cloggers and somebody else picks them up. Like when you clean out your garage and you put that old couch out on the sidewalk and you're like, man, I've got to take this to, I've got to find a place to take this, or
Goodwill's not accepting anything now.
Yeah. Like will the trash guys take this? I don't know. And then somebody comes and picks it up and they just want it. And that's great. That's a problem solved for me. And now they've got a problem. So
and then the couch lives on for another 8 years and brings glory to that person.
But it never scores fantasy points. So
all right. So we got us a Corey Davis in this deal, huh?
Corey Davis, Diggs, and a first.
But since he's going to be a roster clogger, would you toss another third on there? Because, we're going to need somebody to pick up next year to take his place.
No, I thought you might give me the third.
I don't know why you thought that this game. Make it a 2022 third.
No.
So the Corey Davis is enough of an extra.
This
there,
is it. Yep.
Okay, so we're at then a fourth next, 4th and 21, and we'll just stop there. Give me a fourth, and then we handshake, and you've got your DK.
Man, guys, I'm feeling really good that I'm not in any leagues with Jeremy. I'm glad to come away from this with knowing that.
So is that long for deal?
No, that's not.
All right, 2022, and then we're done with this game.
No deal.
In our Patreon account that we don't have yet, in Patreon account, we're eventually going to have Jeremy get to come in and negotiate all of your trades for you. That's part of your monthly fee. He'll come in and be your trader.
Oh my gosh, I'm in. Name price.
So, all right. So we'll call it at Diggs, Corey Davis in first, and consider that 3 done deals. I will say that is not at all how I trade. I actually hate when people do that. And I think I say in the trading article that I don't care that much about, if somebody's going to get so hung up on like a future second or like a next year's third, like I don't care. Like I want the assets that I want in the deal.
Yeah.
And that's not going to stop me. And I like to keep the kind of pressure on while the iron's hot. And, if you give somebody 3 days to think about it, they'll probably get cold feet and think, you know, oh, I don't want to make a bad decision and all that, even though every decision, whether it's sending an offer, accepting an offer, whatever is a decision. Um, I don't trade that way, but I was happy to do that for you, Ryan.
Thanks.
Yeah, so this exercise, I wanted it to be a little bit beyond just, you know, what's DK's market value? Would you do that kind of thing? Would you push it a little bit? I really wanted to make you uncomfortable, which it seemed like we were succeeding in. And to kind of show that, you know, to me, buying is buying, kind of regardless of value. Now, somebody will probably crop that out and be like, "Oh, he's going to trade Ronald, or he's going to trade Saquon for Ronald Jones because he thinks Ronald Jones is better." Like, no, I'm not stupid. I'm just saying that I don't strictly go like I use calculators, I use ADP, I use all these things as data points, but realize that they're rooted in right now. You know, we try and correct for future value and all that, but you know, if DK goes out tomorrow and, you know, does something that limits his season like we've been talking about, or gets COVID and people get down on him, then his value is going down. And that's, you know, that's more just our perception of what's happening rather than like this guy as a player and what he could produce in the future. And Peter Howard was on our podcast a few episodes ago and kind of summed it up beautifully when I said something, you know, about value being all opinion based. And he was like, significant wins in dynasty trades are rarely viewed that way in the moment, because those deals don't happen. Like, you know, somebody like occasionally they do to an owner that's not paying attention or not very good at this, but for the most part, they're all in reflection. And so, you know, don't get caught up so much in what people tell you should do. Go with what your process says. Go for the assets that you believe in based on your roster construction. And if it works out the way that you're hoping for, or expecting for, and it's a calculated gamble, then that's when you're going to make your significant gain from it.
Yeah, I totally agree. You talked about my podcast earlier, Dynasty Blueprint, and so Matt Williamson is in a couple of my leagues, and several years ago we made a trade in one of those leagues, and Matt likes to share those on Twitter, so he posted our trade on Twitter, and he got some pretty bad feedback at the time. He was I think he had been in the league at 1 year. He had kind of rebuilt his team and was almost starting from scratch. I had I think I was the defending champion, or at least a pretty strong team at that point. And I felt like this was early in the offseason. I wanted to get one more running back that I felt really good about. Matt was really just looking for the best talent he could get. He was willing to take some chances. So he took this wide receiver who was coming off two pretty disappointing years. And I got a top 5 running back. And there were a couple other pieces in there as well. But that was basically the deal. And yeah, he just got blasted on Twitter for what a terrible trade that was. You know, maybe that there was even some type of collusion between he and I as podcast co-host. And now he's probably pretty happy with Devontae Adams. And Eddie Lacy didn't really do much more for me and my dynasty team. So I didn't get that top 5 running back I thought I was getting, but he got his top 5 wide receiver, and he came out of that one looking pretty good.
Eddie Lacy has done well for Ponchos and Golden Corral, but beyond the all-you-can-eat buffets has not done so well for your fantasy team.
Right. Eddie, we know you're a listener. I'm sorry. So I think with Ryan referencing Twitter, I should just come up with a quote and say that we should listen to everything and nothing on Twitter.
Yes.
That's your psychological thought for the day. I mean, we all use it for all of our information, and we should probably not. Anyway.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
You know, I think this has been a phenomenal episode. You know, I really appreciate you being out here, Ryan. Again, we didn't really dive into all the places that we can find you. We kind of scattered over the topics that we can find you on DLF and all these other different places. But can you give us your Twitter handle just so that we have it here and let us know where we can follow you in the future?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Most of my work is at DLF, dynastyleaguefootball.com, and also do some work for Roto World as well. And as you guys mentioned, I have a couple of podcasts, DLF Dynasty Podcast, Commission Impossible. Both of those are on the DLF family of podcast network. And the brand new, transitioning from Dynasty Blueprint to Locked On Dynasty with Matt Williamson. We're recording our first official episode early next week and really excited to get that going.
That's great. And I know that DLF has a lot of great in-season content as well. And I think you do the Dynasty Stat Pack each week. So look out for that and use it to, improve your game and your in-season game. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. This was awesome. Everything we could have hoped for, everything we probably wished for when we were starting out maybe a year ago or so. But thanks so much for taking the time to grace our small but growing podcast. And, I know that you've done our listeners a great service by dropping your knowledge on here.
I appreciate the invitation. Thanks for having me and would be glad to join you guys anytime. I'll be ready for the hot seat next time, Kyle.
It's so hard. The hot cushion is always difficult. I'll just say that right now, and it doesn't always smell that nice. So I'm looking over there at Jeremy Schwob, and he says something to me. He's tapping on his notebook. He's looking at the clock. He keeps wanting me to pay my bar tab, and I've never done that, but I'm hoping that tomorrow I'll have money for the beer I want today. So Jeremy, tell us how they can find us.
Absolutely. You can find us on anywhere you listen. You can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Pods, Apple Pods, YouTube, and of course, follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Self Help. Follow Rich at Streaming Rich. Kyle, if you really want to and kind of want a glimpse into whatever's going on there, at Dogleg Brewer. I'm at Jer Schwob, and we will see you next time.
Cool. All right.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Hopefully